My friends, our gospel reading for today tells about a visit between two women, two pregnant women. One was Elizabeth, who was anticipating the birth of her child who would be called John. And the other was Mary, who was also anticipating the birth of a son who would be named Jesus. Now, in the great scheme of things, that visit seemed like a non-event. The really important thing at the time was Caesar Augustus and the Roman Empire. Any realistic person who would have pointed to that would say that was the determining factor of the day. But God knew better. As we see it now, those two little babies, yet unborn, would prove to be more decisive than all the emperors and empires of the world. I believe that when we focus our attention on these two decisive babies, we have more a spirit of hope and understanding of how history unfolds. Now start with the baby, and there's no telling what can happen. You know, we usually think of babies as small and weak and dependent. While that's true, it's also true that we depend more on babies than we really think. Look at history. At times, the world seems hopeless, and then a baby was born. For example, look at the year 1809. Now, everyone thought that the most important thing in Europe at the time was Napoleon and his army. He conquered one nation after another. His name was on every tongue, and people trembled when they thought of that little dictator. 1809, in one sense, was a very, very dark year. The world was almost out of hope. But forget the front page of the newspaper and turn to the birth announcements. Here's a partial list of the babies born that year: Charles Darwin, Abraham Lincoln, William Gladstone, Alfred Tennyson, Edgar Allan Poe, Felix Mendelssohn, Oliver Wendell Holmes. So the world was not as hopeless as it seemed. Now, the Napoleonic Wars are all but forgotten, but the ideas of Darwin and all the others still influence the thinking of people today. Now, babies also give us a sense of being needed. You know, they need help in order to survive. Without us, babies will never make it. Without ordinary people, those extraordinary lives would have counted for little or nothing. I just have one final thought, and it's this. You know, we've spoken of Jesus as one of those decisive babies in history. More than that, he is the decisive baby of history. At Christmas, we will sing his praises. But I ask you this question: how decisive has Jesus been in your life, in my life? It's not enough that he should be decisive in a general way. He must be decisive in a specific way. As one of the poets said, "Though Christ 1,000 times in Bethlehem be born, if he's not born in me, my soul is still forlorn." We cannot take for granted that his coming has made any real difference in your life and mine unless we understand that to be true for ourselves. You know, most of that depends on you and me. If we take Jesus seriously, then his coming will be a decisive factor in the way we live. Otherwise, we can go on living as though Jesus had never been born. Now, what is the difference in your life since Jesus came into this world? How deeply has your attitudes been affected by him? There's no doubt that Christ has come to change history and to change the human heart. But all of that stops at each person's doorstep. When Christ becomes decisive enough for people everywhere, one by one, he will indeed be the most decisive baby in human history.